All right, ladies and gentlemen, as promised, here we come with the 795 main lines. And I'm lying because we are first going to look at the sideline of the 95 variations sidelines. And so after the now well-known introductory moves of knights out, e5, d6, knight d5 jumps in. This is a deadly threat with knight either to c7 next. So the capture on the d5 is a must. And after he takes d5, we have the choice of going back to e7 or b8, of which b8 is the more popular, and this is going to be our go-to move, our choice. Once again, I would like to reiterate that this is a very different structure from the mainline Sveshnikovs, and White follows an altogether different policy and strategy. They don't want to do anything with the d5 square as an outpost. Instead, they are trying to capitalize on the 4 queenside pawns against our 3 pawns and make something happen on the queen side. Now, the main variations after knight b8 will be c4 and a4, but in this early part of the discussion of this chapter, we are going to deal with bishop e3 and queen f3 first. So let's kick off with queen f3. Now, early queen sorties should always ring an alarm bell and go like, what are you up to, chief? And chief is up to queen c3, which is definitely a super nasty threat that we're best advised to dodge. And dodging that looks like this. a6. And now comes the secondary point of queen f3 as the queen slides over to a3, creating a pin and also exerting pressure on d6. Having said all of this, the a5 pin is a knife or blade that cuts both ways. As you will see, we are often going to utilize this as a tactical source, luring the queen in, sacking an exchange, and obtaining some crazy initiative. Bishop e7, most logical. We would like to tuck our king away and be sure that the king is safe so we can then start our operations in earnest. And now if bishop g5, we're going to have some fireworks, and there's bishop d2 here as well. Bishop g5 is going to be the first one we look at. So here white is trying to deflect our bishop on e7, and we are actually going to ignore this altogether. f6 is a move here too, but I think bishop f5 is the cleanest way to deal with this business. And now if bishop takes e7, we simply retake with the king. Do not worry about your king being exposed, because it is not exposed. There is nothing that can attack it. It's easy to tuck away. And on top of everything else, we have got a variety of ideas here to demonstrate that tactics, once again, are not necessarily on white side, but on ours. For example, c4, and here comes the shocking boomski, knight c6, connecting queen and rook, and thus threatening a takes b5. Not bad. Knight d6, giving up the knight first, but this endgame is very, very clearly better for black. I don't know if it's winning, but it's certainly better piece activity, better king placement, and neither of these pawns are genuine weaknesses. Both of them are going to step up the dark squares, and we are going to be absolutely golden. So this is not a problem at all. Queen g3, third queen move in a row. That can't be right either. The plan, of course, is queen g5, checking down the f5 bishop. Knight d7. We don't care. We develop. And yeah, now queen g5 can just be met by knight f6, queen f5, and then we take b5, and we are absolutely golden. So the knight goes home, and now we simply pick off c2. Takes g7, h6, a cheeky move to cut out the queen g5 check. Now the queen has to go all the way home. Queen b6, and once again, typical Sveshnikov story. And the white king is actually a lot more insecure than its black counterpart, since we are developed and we are ready to strike. And strike we will. The queen is now threatening queen b2. Rook g8 is on the cards. And indeed, rook g8, here we go. White has to bail out with a queen exchange. after which, of course, our king is even more justified to be placed on e7. Wherever we look, we see black's superiority, better piece placement. The rooks are very annoying on the c and g files. We have a slightly better pawn structure. It is just sheer perfection. So queen g3 is also out, and finally f4 is another very aggressive idea. Here we are going to go queen b6. Now this move typically puts a takes b5 on the map, as we can often follow it up with queen e3 check with absolutely dire consequences. Fe, ab, this is the demonstration of said dire consequences, by the way. Queen a8, knight a6, queen takes rook, check, bishop g4, and after king d7, it's time to put the pieces back in the box as the white is getting checkmated. Wow! Once again, a beautiful checkmating variation in the Sveshnikov. What's there not to like? So, that was the bishop g5, bishop takes e7 variation. If they instead go bishop e2, now again, we cash in on this opportunity to take the knight on b5. Note that bishop takes b5 would blunder to knight d7 when the queen all of a sudden sufficiently protects the rook on a8. So the rook has to be captured. I will show you bishop e7 actually first. In this case, we enter an endgame, rook a3, bishop d8, rook back. Now d8 is hanging. Bishop g5 and bishop h4 are the two lines. If bishop h4, we simply play f6. All of this was played in a correspondence game. And yeah, now if bishop takes, then king e7, f4, bishop c2, and this position is very comfortable for black. The one big pawn chain on the king side is really, really cool. The king will find safe haven on d6, knight d7, and d5 is going to become potentially vulnerable. Knight a6 is also good, routing the knight towards c5 and allowing rook c8, bishop back, yeah, and everything is under control. It's a fairly long-winded variation. If f4 right away, we take king f7, and again, the king side pawn mass is quite sizable, and I actually prefer black here as a result of that. We are definitely not worse here. So, yeah, that was bishop takes e7. And with that now out of the way, let's go to queen a8. And this is where, again, bishop g5, queen b7, and we have got the two minor pieces against the rook. However, this looks very scary on account of us losing all of our queenside pawns barring the d6 one, granting white two protected pass pawns. So let me show you how we deal with those fast runners. Queen c7, queen takes c2, and knight d7. Development is absolutely imperative. And now we are going to try to relocate our pieces in a way that will allow us to blockade those pawns, starting with rook b8, trading the queen, and then bishop d8 is the key idea. And as soon as the pawn moves on a5 to a6, the bishop comes to b6, and the pawn will be blockaded, in fact, caught and captured. It's a dicey line, but it's definitely the correct line. Okay, so that was the bishop g5 goofy business. Bishop d2 is more typical. This move plans to play bishop b4 and hurt us on d6. So the best policy is to get out of the way. And as it is now becoming customary, when white lets that knight hanging on b5 for too long, we cash in. This exchange sacrifice is almost always going to give us fabulous attacking prospects. For example, here with bishop g5. Note that the queen on a8 is a really, really poorly placed piece, and it will take a fair few moves, actually, to read out that queen and bring it back to the defense. Take. Not the only move by any means. Queen a7 is also playable. When we take, bishop f5 is played. Now knight b4 is going to attack d5 and c2 at the same time. And that is going to ensure a very pleasant position for black. Meanwhile, the white king is constantly in doubt as to which way to go in order to find safe refuge. And good luck with finding the correct answer to that dilemma. So, if bishop g5, we take back. c3, that's to deny knight b4. Queen g6, that is to sell queen c2 with game-winning consequences. Castles, bishop g4, queen hanging, rook hanging. We know that this is not going to end well for white. And yeah, that queen is now penetrating with elementary power. And we are going to pick off pawns with checks. Easy victory for black. So finally, bishop to e2, b6. This is a very multi-purposey sort of move. We can defend the rook with bishop b7 if need be. It also covers the c5 square. And yeah, now after c4, knight d7, knight d6, we can just go a5, denying bishop b4. And at this point, it's easy to see that getting out of this pin is going to be an incredibly problematic story for white. Castles, bishop a6, and now we have got f5, rook f6 on the cards. Might even have queen b8, but I think f5, rook f6 is best, with absolutely dire consequences for white again. And thus, we ended queen f3, ladies and gentlemen. Moving on to bishop e3, looks like a more sensible move, but there is a very serious downside to it, which is that in the absence of c4, now the knight is going to have to go back to block the c pawn, and so now, comparative to the main lines with c4, white's position doesn't make sense, because they're not building up for this pawn advancement on the queen side. And if that's the case, then what are they playing for? Knight a3 is an interesting alternative, trying to reroute the knight toward b6, but of course this is where our b8 knight comes in handy. It's going to cover all those critical squares. We can just safely castle, and of course we are looking to expand on the king side with f5 with a fabulous position. Once again, I would like you to note that white is desperately lacking both pawn breaks and an adequate plan. So yeah, it's just a bit disjointed, really, this whole position for white. So is knight c3, mind you, in my opinion, as once again now this pawn really wishes that it had gone further up before we got here. Bishop d3. Look, this is very pretty and very ineffective. Like, white has got no business whatsoever to conduct down this way, because we are going to play f5. And in fact, we are going to be the king side aggressors. And as far as the queen side efficacy of the bishop pair is concerned from d3 and b6, they're not really hitting anything meaningful. And so it looks good, and it does absolutely nothing. It castles f5, f3, knight d7, and we are doing absolutely fantastically well. And queen d2 is actually going to potentially transpose if they play f3. If instead they opt to play f4, you just play knight d7. I would like to advise you to try to refrain from this knee-jerk reaction of pushing the pawn in. It actually fixes the pawn structure, surrenders the d4 square. It's overall a move that I think we should just avoid at all costs. Bishop d4, knight d1, knight d3, castles, and white has got now an awful lot of very good-looking, very easy moves, and we have no intention of making their life easy. We would like to retain the tension and go from here. And again, this is almost identical to one of the main lines where the white pawn is on c4, making white's position way better. And so there is no way that this one is not going to be a very preferable position for us. In fact, it is. Black is happy as Larry. b6, knight c5, g6, bishop f6, many ways to keep on building our position without taking any risks whatsoever. And as a matter of fact, this is going to be sufficient for us to call off the queen f3, bishop e3 sidelines and begin our investigations of the bigger main lines in the 795 branch. So let's have a look at those ones.